Well, good morning. Addiction to both medical and recreational drugs continues to be a major concern here and across the country. And what impact will Michigan's legalization of marijuana have on drug addictions? We'll talk about those issues and others. Conversation starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
It's always a pleasure to welcome today's guest back to the show. Dr. John Laitinen has been practicing medicine for over 40 years in Upper Michigan and has been here before to provide some real insights into a major problem in our society. The issue is addiction, and it's a problem that seems to be getting worse, not better. Dr. Laitinen, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, Don.
You know, before we talk about that serious subject, I think you're just a great example of how someone can be born in the Upper Peninsula, spend all of their life here and still live a really fascinating life and rewarding life.
It certainly has been, and right place, right time for a lot of those situations. And that's what's really made it rewarding, that you don't really need to be in other bigger areas of the country, that it still is accomplishable by living here in the UP.
And you were a Copper Country native, as I recall, and
Yes.
you went to Wayne State.
Yep.
You know, when you came out, did you have a specialty at that time, or were you in general practice?
Yeah, I was, my plan had been, after I finished medical school and residency training, to come back to UP, and so training in family practice, basically to be able to manage and take care of a big patient population was my goal, and when I came back. But actually, when I was in Detroit, I was running a family practice residency, and the program had just started here. And so Dan Mizuki, who was running it at the time, gave me a call and wondered if I might be interested. Well, pack my bags, here I come.
Right, right.
So.
Besides, and we'll talk about medical issues, but I know the Olympics are coming up this year, for example. They'll be here on NBC and TV6, and they're going to be in Tokyo. And you had a lot of involvement with some past Olympic Games.
Yes, I've been to worked three Olympics, Barcelona in '92. I was the head physician for the U.S. team in Atlanta. And then in 2008, I was in Beijing. Okay. And so I've had a lot of experiences working Olympic Games, and they're challenging and in many ways rewarding too.
And when you were in Atlanta, that was the year there was the bombing. Did that have any effect on?
Oh, it sure did. It was one of those situations that once it happened, they have game plans for anything and everything, and a bomb going off, they even have a bomb disaster plan, and that got implemented right away. And the key thing for us was to make sure none of the athletes or support staff was actually involved in it. And with what we had set up, we were able to make that determination relatively quickly that we didn't have anybody in harm's way in regards to that bomb going off.
So, what's it like working with some of these superstar athletes? Do you get some divas in the group? Or?
Well, you always do. Again, it depends on the sport. It's challenging, rewarding, and people often said you should really write a book about your experiences, because there have been some really interesting ones, but without being able to use their names.
Right.
It really is, the name really makes the story, and without it, really you're not in a position to really share a lot of that information that is really privileged, and it happens with the idea in mind that it isn't going to be shared, but rewarding for a lot of the athletes, rewarding for what you're able to do to help them participate, compete, in many instances mental.
And one of the issues continues to be doping, and Russia has been banned from competing, as I understand it. Is that something you encountered as a doctor?
Absolutely. I was with the Olympic Committee's drug testing program for many years, and I wouldn't say all athletes, but many athletes, especially in some of the non-U.S. countries, looking for anything they can do to get a competitive advantage, and new products, new things to try, see if they can be better at what they're doing, whether it's blood doping or a new drug that comes out for performance enhancement. It is ongoing, but the testing is getting so much better right now that they're able to detect a lot of these things that people might be using. So.
And as far as your life and career, you've also been the team doctor for the NMU hockey team for many years.
Well, not only the hockey team, but all of NMU athletics. But yeah, I've worked, been one of their coaches when Walt Kyle was there, and been their team physician and traveled with the hockey team. So that's one of my passions in life is hockey, and have coached since I've been in Marquette. So being involved in that kind of a program is really rewarding.
Let's talk about addiction, and how would you define addiction to start with?
Well, there's lots of terms that get thrown around. Basically, anybody that develops the disease, it's a chronic disease. Once you have it, it's something you're going to have for the rest of your life. It is manageable today. We have things that we can do to manage this disorder, and a lot of it is really dependent on the type of drug that somebody might be using. Now, UP certainly has always had an alcohol problem. That really hasn't abated or lessened at all, but what we've seen over the last 20 years is just a movement to opioids and methamphetamine and cocaine and kratom, and my God, it's just unbelievable the stuff that is out there that people are using right now.
What, we've only got a few seconds here before we take a break, but I think one of the important things for people to understand is, and I base this on a conversation we had before, some people may think that this is just a lifestyle choice that people make, but it's more complicated than that, isn't it?
Yes, people would think, and still to this day, many times will say that if people could choose whether they can become a drug addict or not, or an alcoholic or not, the reality is many people get addicted by being prescribed legitimate opioids, as an example, for pain, for a broken leg. And in many instances, that's just enough they have the right type of environment, they might have a positive family history, there could be a whole variety of factors, but addiction can develop as a result, and not by their choice, by any means. And once they have it, people many times will say if they wanted to, they could quit. Well, they just can't quit. The change in brain chemistry that occurs with somebody with this disorder is very difficult to manage, difficult to treat, and without treatment, very difficult for them to get it under control.
Okay, we'll follow up on that in just a couple of minutes. Back with more thoughts on today's show after we take this break. Again, our guest this morning is Dr. John Lehtinen. He's an addiction specialist at UPHS Marquette. You know, first of all, I think an important question is, can most addicts deal with their issue on their own?
I wouldn't say most. Some can. Certainly there are people who develop the disorder and are able to stop using, change their people, places, and things that contribute to them maybe having continued to use. But for the most part, most people that I end up seeing, that's not the case. It just changes brain chemistry to such an extent that without appropriate treatment, they can't get it under control. Basically, it's a loss of control disease. People may tell me, well, I have this under control, and I look at them and say, your addicted brain has got you under control, you know, and to deny that you have, you know, that there isn't control there is part of the issue of trying to convince people that how they need to manage it.
And you've used that phrase in a conversation before, but I think you've said something like, you know, part of your brain actually takes over, you know.
Well, the reward area of the brain, the things that give us pleasure, actually takes over in people's brains, and the drugs that people end up using or alcohol reinforces that rewarding effect, and the brain likes that feeling. It likes what has been accomplished by using, and so it does everything in an attempt to get you back to using. And
including making you not feel good if you don't take it. Right?
You bet. That is a big issue. It creates all kinds of issues, and whether it's withdrawal or anxiety, depression, you name it, your body will produce enough symptoms to, well, finally you got to use, and you're right back to square one again.
Can everyone be treated if they make the effort?
Yes, I think so. They need to decide. They need to do something about it. So many people that I see right now see me because they're forced to. They got a legal problem, they have a job problem, they have a family problem. But unless they're the ones making the effort to come in and get help, those are the people that we have the best success for. They want to change their lifestyle, and they will do what it takes. And so we have a lot of success, and that's what keeps me doing it. It's very rewarding to help these people and their families get sober.
And when we talk about treatments, are we dealing with psychological things, or are we dealing with drugs that replace drugs? How do you go about this?
Well, both. I mean, medication-assisted treatment is the mainstay for the opiate addiction problem epidemic that we're facing right now. And we have good treatments out there. But all the psychological therapy, counselors, those are all important components, because then they help you develop strategies to deal with those situations you're going to encounter in life that make you at higher risk for relapse.
And going into it, though, people have to understand this can be a long process, I understand.
I always tell people that if you're willing to work on it, it'll take me a year to get things stabilized and to get things working in the right direction. If you're willing to work, we'll eventually get things stabilized for you, but it takes a long time for the brain to heal. The brain will heal. The addicted part continues to be there, but the healthy part that is healing is the part that we need to get as much time away from alcohol or drugs.
Let's talk about some of the specifics. Now, the opioid crisis, we've all heard about this now, and I think it has the attention of everyone. How did we get here?
Well, there's a variety of factors that led to that. Many decades ago, there was people with chronic pain were put on pain medications, and the medical community was told that it wasn't addictive, and the reality was it was very addictive. And so now people, there's a real pendulum swing now from managing chronic pain using no opioids, but trying to look at other medication-assisted therapies that we have available to deal with chronic pain situations. So that the drug companies were very good at marketing, especially oxycodone, which is highly addictive. And once people get addicted and the access becomes to be limited as it is, then they start going to the street. You know, a lot of the stuff that comes from China, like fentanyl, heroin, or any other substance that might be there that people start to use. So I see a real mixed bag right now with people that have an addiction disorder. It might be opioids or alcohol, but lack of access, many times they will start to use alternative drugs, methamphetamine probably being the number one that we're seeing so much of right now.
And we did for a while see where people were kind of doctor shopping too, weren't they, and going to several doctors and getting drugs. But I think we've made some regulatory changes that may be helping.
Yeah, the reporting, there's a MAPS, what's called a MAPS report, a medication-assisted prescription system that shows what medications, specifically controlled substances, are prescribed, who's prescribing them, and so you can look at those reports and see if people are doing that. So pharmacists use it, we use it, and so it does help us to identify those people who might be trying to do that.
Okay. More questions in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on today's show after we take this 2-minute break. Again, our guest this morning is Dr. John Lehtinen, an addiction specialist at UPHS Marquette. So, Michigan decided to legalize marijuana. Good idea or bad?
Well, from my perspective, bad.
Okay.
Bad. I've just found over the years of people that have used it as being a gateway drug to other substances, especially if teenagers start to use when the brain is most vulnerable. We're starting to see now that the potency of marijuana that's out there is a lot higher than it used to be, say, 20 years ago. The synthetic marijuanas also are an issue, K2 spice. And we're starting to see some of the psychological problems. People are developing psychosis from some marijuana, and it's that and meth really are leading to issues where it's changing brain chemistry so significantly that they almost look like they're schizophrenic. So it's, from my perspective, I guess I just see the worst case scenario now. Certainly there are people that are going to be able to use it and not have any issues or problems, just like with alcohol. But for those that already have an underlying potential for disorder or already have an addiction disorder, it's not going to help.
I think you've said before when we've talked that there probably are some medical value for some people for marijuana.
There probably is. CBD oil probably is the big one, right? That's everybody's marketing right now. The problem with it is it's not regulated very well, and so much of CBD oil has significant amounts of marijuana in it, even though when they started the development of it, it was supposed to have less than 0.3%. Well, many times the value of that is so much higher. So
you got to be careful when you're using that.
Absolutely,
as well.
yeah.
You know, and we do. We mentioned it a little bit, but we kind of put alcohol in the back seat. It seems, you know, as recreational drugs have become a big issue. But alcohol is still a very serious problem, isn't it?
Absolutely is. Biggest issue is people getting in to see someone like myself. So many of the people that we end up seeing on any given day tend to be more non-alcohol related problems, but the alcohol issue still is there. And the struggles for anybody that has a disease of alcohol can be very problematic and is very problematic.
You know, and we had a great example of that with State Representative John Kiva.
Yeah, exactly.
And it also demonstrates again that we're not always aware of when people have these issues.
Exactly, and you know, he had an ongoing problem, and I never had the opportunity to meet him or to provide any health care for him, but that's a good example that they can function, but the disease at times does take over, and those kind of unfortunate things end up occurring.
And alcohol has really ruined many lives.
Absolutely has, yes.
What about cigarettes, tobacco? You know, we all know it's terrible for us, and I quit smoking 1984. but why do people keep smoking?
Well, start young. I mean, it is instantly addictive for a lot of people. They don't like the first few puffs, but boy, the effect it has on the brain, it becomes very rewarding. And so it's a struggle for people to have them quit smoking. And now with all the vaping going on, you know, whether it be marijuana products or whatever else might be in the vape, but some of the challenges and difficulties with some of the lung diseases that are starting to show up now with that disorder.
Have you had to deal with that at all?
I have not. I ask about it for everybody who's vaping. I'm going to quit smoking, so I'm switching to vaping, and I'm not sure if that's really an improvement or not. I guess time will tell if we can get them to stop completely. So people are trying to quit smoking. They go to vaping, and but again, depending on what they're using, I don't know how much help that's going to be.
Yeah, we have less than a minute. You know, to sum it up, if someone's having a problem, what's the first step?
Well, recognize it is a problem. Decide you want to do something about it. Get in to see somebody to determine what's going to be the best course of action for you. And the problem here in the UP is the only practicing addiction medicine physician. That's really a challenge for people. And I see people from Ironwood to the Sioux, Menominee to Copper Country come to see me because they really don't have resources in those communities to help them deal with those addiction issues.
And the problem is if you don't do something, it's going to be there forever, right?
It's going to be there forever, and negative things are going to end up happening.
Thanks for coming in this morning and
You
sharing
bet.
the stories. We'll have some more thoughts for you in just a couple of minutes. In 1976, an idea was introduced at Lake Superior State University. Hoping to put a wider spotlight on the then small college in Sault Ste. Marie, the late W.T. Robbie, the public relations director, along with fellow faculty and staff at LSSU, came up with the first list of words and phrases that people love to hate. It was published on January 1st, 1976. The idea of publishing an annual list of banished words caught on. The process became more organized and a new tradition was established. So this year, on January 1st, the school published its 45th annual list of banished words. You know, each year as I check out their list, I find myself agreeing with some of their choices, but not always. I'm guessing others may have similar feelings, and perhaps that's part of the fun of having such a list. So the most nominated word or phrase for banishment in 2020 is quid pro quo. No question the phrase has been overworked in the congressional hearings in Washington, but I've always thought it was a useful phrase. The dictionary defines it as something given or received for something else. Quid pro quo makes it sound more official. On the other hand, I completely agree with the selection in their category called words banished for pretentiousness or imprecision. The word they choose there is literally. Now, the word literally is meant to imply something actually happened, but it has instead taken on a connotation that is the exact opposite of the meaning of the word. Now, if I say I literally do a weekly television report, that means I do, and it's true. But if I tell you I was watching a singer perform who literally knocked my socks off, we know that's not likely true. But that's what the word has become. It's a word for emphasis that is the opposite of what the word literally actually means. It's clear to me we need the word literally, but we have to use it correctly. Some of the other words on this year's list include influencer, curated, mouthfeel, and chirp. You know, each year when I check their list, I sometimes feel I'm out of touch because I'm not even aware some of these words exist, let alone get overused. Examples from this year's list include jelly, as an abbreviation for jealous, and totes, the abbreviated version of totally. Can't say I've encountered either of those. You know, if you'd like to know more about the list and why the words were selected, you can easily find the story on their website at lssu.edu. Well, with that, my time for this segment is literally up. We have a quid pro quo with some area businesses. They sponsor this show and we run their commercials. Works out well. Time for a couple right now. I'll be back in a minute. Our time is up for this week. The Today Show is waiting around the corner. There's time to remind you can get the latest news anytime at uppermichigansource.com. You can also find current and past episodes of this show at that same internet address. Thanks to Dr. John Leitner for being here today to discuss the challenges of addiction in our society. And thank you for joining us. Hope to see you again next Sunday morning.